Hello everybody, welcome to World of Warcraft. Today I'm going to be going over briefly all the races and the classes for this game. I was thinking, you know what, new expansion I'm sure is about to be announced at BlizzCon, and I kind of want to make a guide for all these races, all these classes. But starting out, we're just going to talk a quick overview about all of them, then we'll make specific videos for each class. So, just hopping right into it, we're going to go over the races real quick here. This doesn't really matter, this is just where you want, what cities you want to play in, what you want your character to look like, basically. It doesn't really matter as much anymore. So yeah, getting right into it. We have the humans. These are just humans, they live in human towns, they do human things. The dwarves, they live in mountains. They're dwarves, they do dwarf things, basically. We have the night elves, which are kind of akin to something like a wood elf in other media, but a little bit different. You have the gnomes. They're gnomes. You have the Draenei, or Draenei, whatever you say. They are basically space goats. They came on a spaceship, they look like goats. You have the Worgens, which are humans inflicted by a curse, and that turned into furries, basically. They look very cool as something like a rogue or a warrior. Very neat. You have the Pandaren, which are panda people. They're big, stout, and they drink a lot of booze. You have the Drakthir, which are only evokers. This is a Dragonflight only class for now. Very neat looking. They're scaly and, you know, can be a human as well with horns and stuff. I can't show you because you can only have one on each class. I can actually show you. That's what they look like. Very cool. You can change lots of stuff about them. It's very neat. Next, we have the allied races. This is for both Horde and Alliance. So far, there's only, what, 5 on each side. I'm hoping they're planning to add more, but for now, we have Void Elves, which are kind of like the Blood Elves on Horde. But they're kind of, they're purple. They look purple like this, mainly. But you can also make them look kind of more like high elves. You have the Lightforged Draenei, which are like Draenei, or Draenei. I'm going to alternate that every time I say it. But they're infused by the light. They make very good paladins or priests. The Dark Iron Dwarves. These make very good warriors. They're super neat looking. Got kind of like that ashen skin and that like fiery mane. It's very cool. The Kultirans, which are very stout and hardy humans from an island. They are super cool. They look really cool as druids. When they transform here, they have very cool forms for all of their forms that druids have. And the Mechagnomes, which are like gnomes, but they're made out of metal. Getting into the Horde side, you have the very generic green orc. Very big, very cool. The undead, which are only undead humans. There are no undead other races. The only exception are elves that have a customization to make them kind of look like undead, which are very cool, as you can see here. Makes them like very light-skinned and red eyes. Very neat. Next is the Tauren, which are cow people. Make very good shamans, druids. The Trolls, once again, shamans and druids. Very neat, very troll. The Blood Elves, which are mana-drunk elves. They're very attuned with magic and kind of like they're very good warlocks as well, because they usually have very pale skin and green eyes. You can change all the customization around though if you want. Next is the Goblin. It's a Goblin. Pandaren, like I said before. Drakthir, like I said before. Then on their allied races, they have the Nightborn, which are very elegant, like very attuned with magic, and very, yeah, tall, very cool. High Mountain Tauren, which are like the Tauren, but they've got big antlers and live in a mountain. The Magar Orcs, which are untainted orcs. They don't have green skin, they're kind of their natural skin colors that orcs used to have before they turned green. Very cool, make very good like, traditional classes like Warrior Hunter, Shaman. The Zandalari Trolls, which are very cool because they can be paladins. They're kind of blue-skinned and they have glowing eyes. They're from a different continent. They're very cool. Then the Valpura, which are fox people. They make very cool robes, as well as something maybe like a warlock. They have cool shaman totems as well. So that's it for the races. Very unique races. Some obviously pretty normal, you know. got humans, dwarves, orcs, undead. You know, very classic fantasy stuff. In terms of the classes, this is where it gets interesting. Not all races and classes, or not all races can be all the classes. Like humans and, you know, like dwarves can't be like druids, stuff like that. You know, and you know, like night elves can't be shaman or paladins, stuff like that. That's a cool customization for that. Anywho, so getting into the classes, like I said, we will be going over this in more depth in each individual class's video, going over their spells, how they play, all that. Basic rundown for all of them. Starting with the warrior, they have 2 melee DPS and then a tanking spec. There is protection, which is the tanking, so sword and board, you know, you're soaking damage like a tank does. They have arms, which is one-handed, or excuse me, one two-handed weapon. More slow and methodical, more like, you know, that type of gameplay. And then there's Fury, which is more like a berserker or a barbarian, where you have 2 big weapons and you're just smashing through everything. We have the hunter, which has 3 specializations, all DPS. There is marksman, which is kind of like your lone ranger sniper variant of a hunter. Very cool. You have beastmaster, which is the opposite. So you have 2 pets and you kind of control them and help them fight. You have survival, where you're fighting with your pet in melee. It's a melee hunter spec with like a polearm. Very cool as well. Use like bombs and like a crossbow. You have your mage. You have frost mage, which is kind of like control. You freeze and slow things. You have fire mage, which is like healing and big damage on yourself, and you're just boom, 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 you know, burning everything. And then you have arcane, which is kind of the similar thing, but there's no like self-healing, and you're just doing like big mana bombs. You're just, you know, shooting arcane energy at everyone. Next is the rogue. This has 3 damage specs. You have assassination, which is like dots and poisons that you're using on people. Subtlety, which is kind of like your ninja class, so a lot of like stealth and sneak attacks. And then you have your outlaw, which is like pirate, so you've got like a blunderbuss and like a pistol. You're using like, you know, like swords and stuff. You have your priest, which has 2 healing specs and a DPS. The DPS is shadow, so you're using like a lot of shadowy abilities and like tentacles, like old god stuff. Very cool. You have holy, which is your very stereotypical holy healer spec, so light, angels, stuff like that. Then discipline, which is a mix of the 2 that is healing through damage. So you put like shields and little heals on your allies, and then you do damage to heal them. The warlock, this has 3 damage specs. You have demonology, where you're using demons to help fight alongside you. You're summoning a bunch of them just to do damage with you. You have affliction, where you sacrifice your demon to like use like corruption and like curses and stuff on your enemy, and kind of do like a dot playstyle, kind of like the assassination wave. Then you have destruction, which is kind of like a fire mage, but you're using like lots of destructive fire and like meteors and summoning like fire demons to attack. Next is the paladin. This has 3 specs as well. It is a tank, a healer, and a DPS spec. The DPS spec is called retribution. This is one big 2-handed weapon. You're just smashing everything, just calling down holy light to kill everything, stuff like that. Protection, which is a lot like the warrior protection, but with a holy spin, so, you know, a lot of holy damage as well, putting down stuff like that. Then you have holy, which is kind of like holy priest, but plays a little bit more like discipline, where you're doing more damage. You're up front doing a lot of damage while you're healing. Next is the druid. Druid's a little special. It has 4 specializations. It has a tank, a healer, a melee DPS, and a ranged DPS. So the tank is called Guardian Druid. You turn into a big bear and you just maul everything. This uses rage. We'll get into rage in the warrior video as well. That's another thing the warrior uses as their resource. You build up rage, use stuff to, you know, thicken your fur, and, you know, you survive, obviously, like a tank. Restoration, which is the healing spec. This uses mana. Mana is basically what all the casters use, obviously. This is, you use kind of like trees and nature and all that stuff to heal. It's a lot of hots or heals over time. Place those to either just sit, or you can use the hot to like greater heal them. Next is the melee DPS feral, where you turn into a cat and it plays like the rogue, using energy and combo points. This is all about bleeds, so once again it kind of plays like the assassination rogue. Then there is balance. Balance is a caster, so it uses both mana and something called astral power, which is unique to the balance druid, but you call down like stars in the sun to do a bunch of damage, and just, you know, big kind of like it ramps up like over time with dots in it, and just, you know, big damage, stuff like that. Next is the Shaman. The Shaman has 3 specs: a melee DPS, a ranged DPS, and a healer. The melee DPS is called Enhancement. This is where you have the elements flow through your weapons. You're doing like big fire and wind and like lightning attacks through your weapons. Then there is Elemental, which is kind of the same, but it's ranged and you're not using a weapon to channel your abilities. It comes right through you, so you're shooting a bunch of lightning balls and like lava bursts and stuff at a range. Then there is Restoration, which uses like water to heal and stuff like that. Next is the Monk, which uses chi as well as energy, I believe. There's Brewmaster, where you're drinking a bunch of brews and stuff too, and that's the tank spec. To tank, and you're spinning around a bunch, stuff like that. There is the Mist Weaver, which is the healer. You're using chi to heal, kind of like the water from the Shaman. You're a bit more active with that class, with that healer as well, a bit more in the fray. Then there is, what's it called? Windwalker? Yeah, Windwalker Monk, which is your DPS, so kind of like your Kung Fu, you know, right in the face, yeah, 1,000 punches, things like that. Next is the first hero class, which is called Demon Hunter, so you might have to do something, I'm not entirely familiar, but you may have to play a little before you unlock this. This is kind of a unique class. It's definitely is based on momentum. You're moving around a lot as this class, a lot of like dashing, and like you use your I-beam, and then you dash, and you're throwing your glaive, stuff like that. This has 2 specs. It has Havoc, which is the DPS. Once again, a lot of movement, a lot of DPS. Then there's Vengeance, which is the tank spec. Once again, lots of movement, but a little bit less, more in a confined area, because you're using a lot of things called sigils that stay on the ground and do damage and effects to the enemies. Next is another hero class. This was actually the first one to be added, called the Death Knight. The Death Knight has 2 DPS and a tank spec. Tank spec is called Blood, so you're putting, you're using bones to protect yourself, you're using blood magic to do damage and, suck the life out of your target and stuff. There's Unholy, which is kind of a mix of the Demonology Warlock and the Assassination Rogue, where you are using a lot of like plague abilities, but you're also raising the dead. It's really cool to do damage, very neat. Then there's Frost, which is kind of like Frost Mage, but in melee form. Which is in melee form, where you're using a lot of Dragon Breath, like freezing targets and slowing them and whatnot. Very cool. Then there's Evoker, which has now has 2 ranged DPS. It's kind of a ranged melee hybrid, and then a healer. The healer class uses kind of like the healing breath and like dragon magic to heal. And then the first DPS spec is kind of the same, but it does damage to like fire breath, like cold breath, stuff like that. And then there's there's Augmentation Evoker, which is kind of unique, where it's kind of a buffing spec, where you're buffing your other teammates. You're still doing damage, but you're buffing all your other teammates. So very cool. We'll definitely go over that as well. But that's probably lowest on my priority, just because it does. It's not like a baseline class. These ones I think you just unlock, and then you can play. These start at level 8 now. The rest start at level 1. But that's basically it. I just kind of wanted to go over each and every one of these, just to say, hey, this is kind of the general playstyle, what you would be doing. And then obviously we'll go into specifics with each video. So I hope you guys enjoy. Hope you guys try it out. And I will see you in the specific videos. Peace.